what are the various types of cybersecurity breaches that the day-to-day civilian will deal with, all the way up to the military?
Phishing, which is a very common avenue of attack, or it's an initial access path for an attacker to get into your corporate systems or your personal system.
They will pretend to be one of us.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, like our staff. So recently, a few of our employees said, it's Andre, I need you to go get me some gift cards.
Yes.
And it's imperative you do it now.
That I come up, what you're describing is what we would call spear phishing. They're going after a particular fish in the pond that they know has a responsibility. They've done perhaps some reconnaissance on that person. They've already broken in their email. They know who their supervisor is. They know they're going to go to a conference in a week. So now all of a sudden they get an email from you, not on a gift card. Maybe it's, hey, I need you to send me this expense report again because I think you're spending too much.
I saw a report the other day, and I want you to kind of give me some context, that if our power grid were to be taken down, that it would erase mankind in 9 months.
Not sure we'd wipe off our civilization in 9 months. That might be a bit aggressive.
Welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, where we're changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. And my goodness, do we have an absolute stud today on the podcast. And I have a guest today who is an expert in his field. And I think nowadays, election season is in order. Everyone's jockeying for protection more ways than one. But there's a protection that we don't see, and because we don't see it, we often ignore it. And that is cybersecurity. And cybersecurity really spans the gamut. Individuals, businesses, organizations, it affects everybody. So one thing that we wanted to do here at the Bedrock Way podcast is to really bring guests that tackle relevant current event topics that we're dealing with today. And recently, there was a big interruption and hack, and it involved a tremendous amount of finances and disruption, and we'll have our guests kind of give us more context on that. But right now, in a day and age where everything is controlled by Wi-Fi, everything is controlled on the network, we have everything on the cloud, and there's so much stuff that the NSA and CIA and all the three-letter agencies are working behind the scenes to protect our country and also to make sure that we make decisions that make sense. Also affects our economic system, everything. We thought it would be a great idea to bring Matt Imperial into the show, welcome him to the Bedrock Way podcast, a lifelong cybersecurity expert, to really shed a light on why this is such an important topic, how we can know a little bit more. And I think the first way of being able to be a change agent in anything that we do is to know more about it, right? So it is a pleasure for me to introduce a friend, a colleague, and someone who I've known recently, but I feel like I've known you for a long time, Matt. So welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, Matt.
Thank you, Andre. I appreciate your time being here and being invited and having the opportunity to speak on a variety of different topics.
And you have an amazing background. And I want to start off with Matt's his bio, which is, again, I thought I had a good bio. Man, your bio is impressive, both in the field of cybersecurity as it relates to the military. And there's probably no more stronger cybersecurity space than what you would see in the military, correct?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
And how long have you been in cybersecurity?
It's going on now 25 years. 20 years in the military. I've now been with Serco North America, providing still government consultant services in the cybersecurity realm for another 6. So.
Wow. And is this something that you feel was your lifelong passion, or kind of something that you created that passion within as you learn more about it?
Certainly got cultivated towards the end of my time at Villanova when I was in ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, Air Force. I was originally interested in the medical field, actually. So that's something that I was looking at being a doctor. That's what my undergraduate was in, and became a little bit disenfranchised with the medical profession at the time. This was the mid-'90s, and
Sure.
Took a left turn and was fortunate enough to get into another one of my passions and interests, which was technology, and have been doing it ever since.
I don't think you took a left turn, Matt. I think you took the right turn.
Right turn, sure.
We'll talk about that in a minute. So Matt grew up in Washington Township, New Jersey, a suburban town east of Philadelphia, around the corner, right? He's one of 3 children born to Anthony and Joanne Imperial, both second-generation Italian-American immigrants. Goombas. I love those. During high school, he participated in numerous extracurricular activities and varsity sports, including football and tennis. And you were a proud member of the undefeated Washington Township Minutemen football team,
I am.
the 1993 New Jersey State champions. So here's a fun fact.
Okay.
We played you guys. And you guys spanked us. I used to be a linebacker and a running back for the AC Vikings.
Okay.
I was on the freshman team that year, and you guys trounced us. So I remember you guys. Some scars, Matt. They don't heal as well, but it is what it is. Directly following high school, Matt attended Villanova University, originally pursuing medical school, as he mentioned. He graduated with a major in biology and minor in theology. Wow, that's a pretty interesting mix.
Yes.
During medical internships and shadowing, he became disillusioned from expressed frustration of medical professionals within the industry and insurance system, limiting and restricting a doctor's ability to care for patients. Man, and this was back in the 90s, and guess what? In 2024, it's still happening.
Oh, it's still happening.
It's still happening.
Okay.
That's what Bedrock is here to do, make doctors' lives easier. During this time, Matt also served as an Air Force ROTC scholarship cadet at St. Joe's University, paving the way for military service in a new career domain. So you decided that with your medical background, or at least that medical interest, that you would be able to put this into good use in the military. So tell me how the mindset kind of worked around that time.
So when you first apply for different career fields in the military, you have to choose. There was an option that I had to potentially go into medical school directly.
Like be a medic?
No, they would sponsor you to go to medical school directly after.
That's
so
awesome.
They pay for it. There's a
GI Bill.
Using the GI Bill in some capacity, just pay for it outright. But there's a process. When I realized I wasn't going down that path, you basically put together what we call a dream sheet, and you put a list of career fields you want. Pilot, intelligence, communications, and information was what we called it at the time. Cyberspace wasn't the in vogue term really at that time either. It was still kind of a burgeoning domain. And communications and information, the precursor to cyber, is what I put on there. That's what I chose and was picked up for. And then the military and their process sends you off to a training school for it.
So when you were developing the dream list, did you score the dream list? Like, how many items did you have on the dream list?
You do
and
rank
where
order.
was cybersecurity? Where was the military in that dream list?
Cybersecurity, I believe, was number 2 or 3 on there.
Oh, really?
They really do ingrain in you as an RC cadet that if you don't want to be a pilot, there's a little something off on you, right? Like they really want to push that as is the primary field. We are a fly, fight, and win force. So I had that as the number 1 career field on my dream sheet, but I feel blessed in that I'm where I meant to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Following graduation at Villanova in 1998, Matt was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force and assigned as a communications and information officer. In his first assignment, he served in the 45th Space Wing supporting Air Force and NASA space launches. Wow. Tell me about that.
It was very interesting. I remember very fondly my first day driving along A1A, which is that beach road.
Beach One Avenue.
Beach One. Didn't even know the Air Force was in the rocket launch business at the time.
Right.
NASA and the space shuttle gets publicized up here in the Northeast, but the rocket launches now a little bit more so with SpaceX, but they didn't used to get much fanfare. And I remember seeing a streak across the sky and kind of like what appeared to be a firework. I was like, oh, I guess that's what the launch looks like. I came to know later that day that was what NASA and the space business likes to call an anomaly. Well, that rocket did not reach orbit and, in fact, exploded a couple miles into its launch.
Oh, wow.
And so that was my first foray into understanding how still dangerous the space launch business can be. It was an unmanned rocket, so there were no casualties or anything of that nature, but it was very interesting being part of space launches. I got to see Senator John Glenn go up his second time when he was, I think, 80 years old, almost at the time.
Yeah.
So it was a very cool mission.
Wow. Now, do you think that passion or that interest, because we were around the same age, so I know the Challenger was a that's a pivotal time in my childhood, right?
Sure.
Like everybody remembers 9/11. Everybody remembers certain times in their lives, and I know I sure as heck remember the Challenger.
I do. I remember the TV being rolled into the classroom and all watching it together when that happened. Sure, of course, we had the teacher, go up in there, tragically lost the entire crew. So that's definitely an indelible moment in my childhood as well.
Yeah, it's like I remember looking back and saying, and we were, I believe I was in 3rd grade. I honestly can't remember what grade I was, but I do remember where I was. I was in Queens, New York, and I was watching it. And then we were all excited because, again, at that time it was something that was very incredible. But they also chronicled each of the astronauts, and one of them was a teacher, and it was in. We kind of know what happened after that, right? So I was interested to see if that's something, but I'm assuming the answer is yes. In 2010, as the cyberspace domain evolved, he transitioned to the newly formed cyber warfare career field, where he developed and implemented global military strategies for defensive and offensive cyberspace operations. Throughout a 20-year distinguished career, Matt served in various roles supporting national defense missions, including space launch, bomber operations, national intelligence, special operations, and cyber warfare. Now, were you ever deployed to do this?
I was deployed. I went over to, I was in Bahrain for almost 6 to 9 months for a time frame supporting Middle East operations during Enduring Freedom, or what colloquially is called the Global War on Terrorism. Yes.
Wow. He served in numerous senior leadership roles, including Chief of Strategy for Air Forces, that's cyber, Vice Commandant at the United States Air Force Special Operations School, correct me if I'm butchering any of these, and Eglin Air Force Base CIO, where you commanded a 363-member squadron and oversaw a $1.4 billion information technology enterprise. Holy moly!
You get a lot of responsibilities as you continue to move up the ranks in the military. One of the most rewarding things is to be that squadron commander. That last job I had at Eglin Air Force Base, being responsible for developing young airmen and civilians is just, it's an extremely humbling and rewarding experience.
Well, it forms you, right?
Absolutely.
It forms you, it transforms you, but it forms you, right? In 2018, following a highly successful career, Matt retired as a lieutenant colonel and planted roots in Miramar Beach along the scenic Florida Gulf Coast. Not too shabby, my friend. Not too shabby. Immediately following military retirement, Matt joined Whitney, Bradley, and Brown, WBB. In 2021, WBB was acquired by Serco Group, a worldwide government services provider. So you were retired, enjoying life in the Sunshine State, but you just couldn't stay away, could you?
Couldn't stay away. I took that position even a month before I formally retired. I did.
So you never retired?
I never quite retired. I did take a good 6-week gap to try to just, take a breath before I transitioned fully, but jumped right in, essentially.
I love it. In your current role with Serco, Matt serves as a federal and military consultant, providing expertise in the cybersecurity, cyber warfare, and informational technology domain. With 25 years experience, he leads multidisciplinary teams in development, operations, and maintenance of cyber-resilient aircraft, munitions, weapon systems, and enterprise IT systems. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so the idea of cyber resiliency is very important, right? Because there's only so much you can do to prevent an attack or an exploitation of some kind. How is your system or your operations, your business going to continue to operate during and through an attack? How are you going to respond and recover from it? So what I do in the resilient side of the house is help build cyber resilient weapon systems. So we say weapon system can be anywhere from an aircraft itself, a fighter aircraft, a bomber aircraft, an aircraft subsystem, or some other things that I work on. And we get into those systems at the software, at the coding level, to be sure that the most critical operations of that device or that platform is able to continue to operate to achieve mission success even through a cyber attack.
So, all right, so I am completely novice about all this stuff, but I am fascinated by it. And I know one thing that the public knows, before we get too convoluted, is we all know the Iron Dome, right? The Iron Dome in Israel. And I know recently in a conversation, Elon Musk and President Trump, or the candidate, I should say, of the Republican Party, ex-President Trump, they mentioned the potential need for us to create an Iron Dome-like protection in the U.S. Is that something that you would be working on?
Potentially. I mean, I'm not on that particular project. In my role, I kind of term myself a flex.
But am I explaining it to the listeners the right way? Like, is that something that you would be part of? Not specifically
Sure.
that project, but is that something that WBB would work on? Because essentially, to protect you from an attack, you would have to preemptively identify it way before, so you can have that
Yes.
offense.
Absolutely. You know, that would certainly be a type of system. I mean, that an Iron Dome is really a system of systems. You're going to have a whole perimeter of defenses and all these different various other anti-aircraft or anti-artillery type things that have to all work together. So yeah, you need to be sure that down to the component level things are working properly, and then also the system itself can.
Can you give the audience and the listeners, Matt, a quick overview, high level, of what an Iron Dome is? Because maybe, again, I've been watching the whole Middle East and the tensions that are happening. Obviously, I'm someone that likes to be geopolitically correct and
Sure.
informed, but I don't think the day-to-day individual is. So can you just tell the audience a little bit more about the Iron Dome? Because I think that's important, right? And I think it's going to be a way of the future. And why is Israel the only, or one of the only countries that has it, or who else has it?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on the Iron Dome. I don't have an intimate amount of knowledge of that specific set of defensive. I would say Israel has it because of, you know, what they endure,
Where they
on
are
a regular
logistically in the
basis.
country,
I mean, they're
in the
directly
world.
next to, you know, known adversaries who don't believe that they deserve to continue to exist on this planet, right?
Correct.
So they have a key critical need to have such a system that can help prevent, detect, and shoot down artillery, rockets, mortars, a multitude of various different munitions that are being fired into their territory. I would say we don't have it. We're not directly next to neighbors that are continually doing that, nor espousing that level of aggression.
Thank
towards
God.
us, right? Thank God. But certainly there are locations and facilities we have that are protected to that level. We would employ similar type systems in a deployed environment, military environments, when we were, you know, fighting in Iraq or Afghanistan. On our forward bases would have to have something of that nature, but at a much smaller level to be able to defend ourselves.
It's fascinating, right?
Sure.
It's fascinating. Now, another thing that I always have been curious about cybersecurity, and someone like you that's done it for so long. Now, do you have to, besides the language of coding, right? Do you have to learn other languages to be able to, or basically you're protecting systems, so it doesn't.
It's a system piece,
agnostic to
yeah.
a
So
language,
the agnostic, yeah. I mean, the language is the mathematics and the algorithms themselves,
which
so.
is universal.
Sure.
Got it.
Yes.
Matt is a blessed and proud father of two intelligent, beautiful, and resilient daughters, Isabella and Grace, both of whom endured numerous military family moves across the United States. Oh, boy, I bet that must have been hard. What are the ages now?
They are now 20 and nearly 18, so almost two full-fledged adults.
And they want nothing to do with you, right?
Very little, right, Andre? Very little.
That's okay. They'll come back. Isabella is currently a junior at Florida State University in a marketing bachelor's degree program. It's a great school. It's a great school. You visit them often?
I see them as often as I can. Like you said, I mean, they're interested in other things besides dad.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? They're modeling their future decisions on men after that. So I think if your bio is any indication of their choices of men, I think you did a good job. Grace is currently a senior in high school and will be participating in the Tallahassee College, Florida State University Aspire program in accounting. So they're not. They know they're following dad, baby. We're going to Florida.
Their fields for sure.
Now, how far is Miramar from their schools?
About 2.5 hours.
That's not bad.
2.5.
In your spare time, because Matt does have spare time, I don't even know, I can't believe how, he enjoys running, biking, hot yoga. And any of the listeners that don't know Matt, or the ones that do know Matt, Matt has probably the most perfect legs in the history of leg making. So the guy can probably be a leg model. The guy is, again, he's made some good decisions in squatting. Where he hasn't made some good decisions is his avid Philadelphia sports fan. He's a fan of the Birds. For those of you who don't know, the Birds are, I call them the Pigeons, the Philadelphia Eagles. Matt currently splits time between his home in Florida and New Jersey, spending quality time traveling with family, friends, and his high school sweetheart. You have a high school sweetheart? Chrissy O'Leary. I think I know that lady.
I think you do, Andre.
Yeah,
I think you do.
She's pretty cool.
Amazing.
Great bio. Love it. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about why is cybersecurity important.
I mean, at the fundamental level, as you know, information technology connects every aspect of our personal and professional lives. So at the very core, securing that information to the level it needs to be is absolutely essential.
But how do I know how much security I need until I get attacked?
It's a tough. I mean, as a business, as a for-profit business, you're always looking at return on investment. The difficulty in your IT department in advocating for security is they're trying to prevent something from happening, right? You're paying for something not to happen, essentially. And that return on investment isn't easy to tell. When that breach does happen, now you realize how much it really hurts and the pain you may go through and loss of profit, income, reputation, things of that nature. But you want to secure things to the appropriate level. You don't want to over-secure things either, because there is such an idea. The most secure system possible is the one that you don't even turn on, right? And then it's useless.
Right.
So
and pricey.
And pricey, sure. But it's the essential nature of IT in our lives and our businesses it's something that's just it's integrated into every aspect and every fabric of our life.
And you can't get away from it, right?
No.
So, but there's so many misconceptions about cybersecurity, and I'll tell you. So, a few months ago, one of the casinos in Atlantic City got attacked. And they had to pay a $24 million ransomware, right,
sure,
to get back in business, right? And then, like you said, there's cybersecurity insurance also.
There is.
Right? So then about a month later, healthcare was attacked heavily by, actually, specifically it was United Healthcare and their Change network where the majority of healthcare workers put their reimbursement. They also had to pay a ransom of about $25 million, but United Healthcare actually got a payout of $160 billion or $1 million, I guess, from their cybersecurity insurance. So what I'm asking you is, could a company insure itself and then attack itself?
And then attack itself? Well, I mean, certainly I would imagine some of the clauses associated with that insurance is of such a nature that if it's determined that there was perhaps an insider or there was some kind of approval or was, just to cash in some kind of policy, life insurance policies may have that too, right? I mean, so I'm sure there are clauses in there to try to protect the insurer from such an event.
So then the other company that I think about recently that went through a lot of this stuff was Ashley Madison. Right, so Ashley Madison was well known to be a website where there were we call them unscrupulous actions where married men and women, right, but mostly married men, would look online for extramarital activities. Right, that's where Ashley Madison was, and they went down because they were saying that they were secure, but they were not.
Sure.
And I think a disgruntled ex-employee attacked them. And that's what I was referring to earlier about what's going to keep someone like you, like your mindset, a lot of these systems, what's going to keep a Matt from attacking, right, or doing something nefarious where they're handing out these ransoms like candy.
Sure.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of Matts out there that are just, again, they know this so well. And I always say a good cybersecurity system is one that's not used, and I'm assuming that's one that's not detected. So, how do we secure? So we do cybersecurity to secure, but who checks the checkers, kind of thing?
Well, there is such a thing in my business of a third-party auditor. You want someone to come in and.
So who does that?
There are companies that offer those as a service. A cybersecurity service. There's also an idea of separation of duties. So you have someone who's responsible for securing the system, and then you have an independent arm, even within your own company, the separation of duties where they can verify that those protections are in place. So there is those. That is a key concept in the cybersecurity realm.
If it's if it's so important, Matt, and we can't get away from it, why aren't people taking it serious?
I think in many cases they're just blind until an event happens, right? I mean, they're trying to focus on, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to run a casino, you're trying to run a healthcare company. You're not trying to run an IT, cybersecurity company. You want someone else to take care of that for you, which in many cases lead an industry to rely upon third-party providers. But it doesn't alleviate you of the legal responsibility and liability of keeping your operations going and securing the data of your customers and employees as well. So it's something that you have to continue to put dollars and manpower and resources towards in order to continue to secure your business operations.
And I agree with you 1,000%, right? Especially in healthcare, right? Healthcare, not healthcare, but let's talk about healthcare. One breach of your system and one exposure of patient health information, if left undetected or if left unaddressed, can shut down a business.
Absolutely.
Right? And you talk about the credit card industry, right? When there's a lot of breaches of people's personal information, there's class action lawsuits that ensue, right? So again, I feel I don't want to question the validity and the need of it, right? The necessity of it. I want to start questioning and maybe nullifying some of the misconceptions. Okay. And the number one, I think, misconception is the incredible amount of value, right? People feel like, and I know, we have a pretty secure, lack of a better word, a pretty good, not great, but we're looking to get better daily, a cybersecurity plan. But I always feel that it's almost put aside because of the expense.
Sure.
So can you give our listeners, because I think this would be a really good misconception, a statement that for every X amount of dollars, you get Y in return. I get the whole insurance, assimilation where, we got car insurance and life insurance. You're hopefully never cash it, but eventually when you do, it's something that you're glad you have, and it's better to have and I need it than need it and not have it kind of thing.
Sure.
What is I want to make sure that everyone who's listening understands that cost is not about can I afford it, is I can't afford not to have it.
Sure. It is a difficult value proposition because, again, you're trying to prevent a negative event from happening. But overall, cybersecurity is in place to protect your information technology, your enterprise systems, the data itself. Those systems should be enabling you to be more efficient as a business. So IT should be an enabler, but to be able to ensure to both your customers and your business partners that your operations are secure can provide dividends in forging partnerships with companies. Are they going to want to come do business with you if they think that Bedrock doesn't have their act together? Right, so there's a value to bringing partners on board by having those security practices in place. You want to make sure that it's very important your third-party providers have those in place. You should be verifying that the people you interact with are doing those things, because by opening up one side of your communication lane with them, you could be opening yourself up to vulnerabilities and potential breaches.
That's a great point. So just like when my oldest is driving, and then my middle is like, can't wait to drive, right? And obviously your daughters, they're drivers themselves. But think about it. When you're learning how to drive, you don't worry about the driver. You worry about other drivers.
That's right.
Right? So in cybersecuring your business, you're not really thinking only about your level of cybersecurity, but in healthcare where you're integrating and interfacing, right, from an EMR standpoint, EHR standpoint, and whatever other standpoint. And again, most of what we do right now is on the network. It's crazy to think that partnering with someone would potentially expose me.
Yes.
So there is a liability, and you're right. I think the biggest value proposition that the audience can use is that we should boast about our cybersecurity plans and really be aggressive in inquiring what the other partners that we're going into business with have. Because again, if they don't have a good plan and we're doing a lot of their business on public Wi-Fi, you're wide open to getting crushed.
You're certainly introducing a very common avenue of attack. Absolutely.
And so I'll get back to the biggest misconception that I think people don't understand is the fact that we have a new currency in the world. And we always used to think that currency was the almighty dollar, right? Or whatever, petrodollar, whatever currency a region has. But the real currency that right now exists is data, right? Data is the almighty currency. And don't let me get started on cryptocurrency, right? Which is essentially another blockchain that can be penetrated by not having a good cybersecurity plan, right? But why is it, Matt? Or maybe it's not. Maybe I'm thinking, why is it that cybersecurity breaches are becoming more and more common?
Well, you mentioned the 2 recent ransoms that were paid. In fact, those companies weren't forced to pay. They made their own business proposition, their own ROI on, I'm willing to put out $20 to $25 million because I realize I'm losing tens of millions every week that goes by that I can't get my operations back up. So they made a business calculus decision in paying that ransom to getting their data back. Clearly, it was too late for them to consider cybersecurity to the level that they needed it once the incident happened. But it's important that those paying the ransom themselves, though, is what's incentivizing more activity to happen, right?
Correct.
Unfortunately, it incentivizes the cyber criminals themselves. So it's a difficult thing. I mean, I understand the decision that those companies made.
So do you think that's what's creating the more occurrence?
I think that the paying of the ransoms, obviously the publicity, because I guarantee you there are, for every company we hear about that publicizes the paying of the ransom, there's probably 10 more that's not publicizing it, perhaps, right?
It's a valid point. Yep.
But the publicity of it is getting it out there, and to me, that's building the momentum and incentivizing those future attacks from happening, unfortunately.
So let's recap to the audience. So a cybersecurity, and again, I'm being very novice, but I want your input. A cybersecurity is every system that you have in your tech stack that helps to support and run your business is secure and has a proactive plan to prevent any future attacks.
So I would look at it a little more holistically. If you take a step back, a typical cybersecurity framework of incident response involves the prevention piece, right? You're trying to prevent something from happening,
Sure.
Whether it's on a system or against the data itself. You want to have your second stage is typically like a detect and analyze. You got to have sensors on those networks and systems to find out what's going on real time. You want to do that just to see if your systems are operating, but to detect potentially nefarious events. If you detect something that needs to be looked into further, you're going to do some analysis. You may move, and then if a breach actually occurs, you're going to set up a response appropriate to the level of the breach. That response is that third phase. And in that one, you're trying to restore your critical operations associated with your business. And ultimately, you're ending with that recover phase. How do we get back to normal operations post-breach? In many cases, it's taken, like in the case of United Healthcare, it's probably going to take them months to recover back to where they were before. There were lots of paperwork arounds being done to get operations back up, which were certainly much less efficient than what they were doing previously. So
love it. So just for the audience, break it down exactly like Matt did, paraphrasing. So your cybersecurity plan should have the following: a good preventative, proactive plan that allows you to detect, analyze, and when breached, have a very strong response that allows you to restore and recover and continue to operate your business.
Yes.
Beautiful. So let's talk about, again, changing gears a little bit. We talked about the real-life examples of significant cybersecurity breaches. We talked about CrowdStrike, the Microsoft one, the casinos, the United Healthcare. What have been some of the greatest cybersecurity breaches that you personally have had to address?
I was part of, during my time in the military, because in my current role, I'm not what you would call tip of the spear type side of cybersecurity. I'm more in the developing the initial parameters of building cybersecurity into the system itself, not necessarily responding to incidents in my current role. During my time in the military, though, I was responsible for several different 24/7 work centers, which were monitoring networks and systems around the globe for our military and such. And there was a particular incident that we determined that one of our military locations had been breached in a pretty serious manner. What we would call like user level and root level access is one of the worst level types of incidents. And it got to the point where we had a lot of very senior military officials involved and wanted to understand what that location was connected to. At the time, this was a very transformational moment in our military cyber warfare domain, in that the initial impulse was, let's cut off that location, because they're too much of a risk to the greater enterprise. And what my boss and my organization argued at the time is that we're not in the middle of a true shooting war today. This is when this was happening. This was a stateside event. If we can't learn how to fight through a cyber attack in this environment, how are we going to do it in a full all-out conflict? So this term came in vogue of fight through the attack, and it eventually evolved in this term of cyber resiliency. The reason those steps exist that I just talked about, you can't just stop at prevention, because nothing's foolproof. There's no silver bullet to cybersecurity. An event will happen. Right. How you respond to it, you want to try to put things in place to minimize whatever event does happen, but you have to have that full cycle to be able to fully respond, recover, and get back to your business as usual, whatever that may be.
Wow. It almost sounds, it sounds so complicated, but it's not, right?
At its very core, again, IT is an enabler. Cybersecurity is trying to protect those information technology processes, systems, and data. We get down to the protection of the data itself, which is especially poignant for your field when you're dealing with protected health information.
Let's talk about something, because I what I love is the different ways that we can get breached. And I'll tell you, man, I remember a few years ago, I had a Nigerian prince who was going to leave me billions of dollars, and I got an email, right?
Sure.
And I laughed for about 20 minutes after reading that email, right? It's obviously a phishing scam. And then I saw a couple of days later how people were falling for this. People were falling for these phishing scams where they were saying I'm going to inherit this much money, and I need you to just deposit money in my account so I can deposit this, right? So you give me $5,000, I give you $1 billion.
Sure.
And unfortunately, a lot of people were falling for it. So what are the various types of cybersecurity breaches that the day-to-day civilian will deal with, all the way up to the military?
Yeah, so you brought phishing, which is a very common avenue of attack, where it's an initial access path for an attacker to get into your corporate systems or your personal systems, right? They send you a phishing email. And again, the quintessential one was the Nigerian prince type schemes. They've gotten a lot more sophisticated nowadays, and
you know what they're doing now? So now, and our staff here gets it. So like, they will pretend to be one of us.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, like our staff. So recently, a few of our employees said, hey, it's Andre. I need you to go get me some gift cards.
Yes.
And it's imperative you do it now. And I had to send an email out to the team saying that, first of all, I would never ask you for a gift card. If you want to send me one, go ahead. But I will never ask you for one. So that's how it's getting almost personal.
Yes.
And it's easier to fall for it.
So we have some more technical terms, kind of variations of phishing that have come up. What you're describing is what we would call spear phishing. They're going after a particular fish in the pond that they know has a responsibility. They've done perhaps some reconnaissance on that person. They've already broken in their email. They know who their supervisor is. They know they're going to go to a conference in a week. So so now all of a sudden they get an email from you, not on a gift card. Maybe it's, hey, I need you to send me this expense report again because I think you're spending too much. So it's a very specific, targeted realm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
spear phishing is a way. So the way that they collect intel is by breaking into your email.
Sure. Absolutely. Doing that reconnaissance piece first. And then another term we've come up with in the industry is whaling, right? Now you're going after the big fish in the pond, the CEO, the CTO, someone who has more access to more information. So those are some of the kind of spin-offs we've seen.
People are spearfishing us and whaling us.
There you go.
That's crazy.
There you go.
So now it would make sense. So we recently had someone reach out to one of our employees, actually Jonathan, our producer, and that person was talking to Jonathan like he was Jonathan. And it was funny how Jonathan was communicating with this person, but using same language. And so now that makes me feel better. So they break into your communications, and then they're able to do that intel, and then they impersonate you.
They impersonate you.
And they validate it by making. Oh wow, that's incredible.
The other instance you brought up, I would say because you asked me what else is a common thing someone would interact with or experience is something we would call a farming attack, PH. And that's where you have someone, and a public Wi-Fi is the perfect opportunity to do this, say at a Starbucks or somewhere else. You sit down and you essentially set yourself up as a man-in-the-middle attack where you're between the Starbucks router and that individual who's trying to get to it. So now all the traffic that's passes through you first. And I know someone's going to come in and perhaps go to what are the most common banks out there? Bank of America, Chase.com. So now I can impersonate myself as that site. Those credentials get passed through me first. I pass them to the real Bank of America, so I still present the information back to you as logging in. But now I know your credentials. So farming attack is one of those that's very common, which is why we recommend people when you're interacting with sensitive data on a personal nature, you shouldn't do it on a public Wi-Fi. You're much better to rely upon the cellular connection that you have, even though it may not be as efficient or fast.
Oh my goodness. So fishing, spear fishing, whaling, and farming. What else?
Those are certainly some very common ones that the user is going to interact with.
How about when they put ransomware in people's devices? What does that do?
Well, there is such a thing as embedding malware at the hardware level.
Right. Is that like a distraction to extract their data?
The ransomware is just a general term for some kind of malicious code that eventually is going to be used to be able to extort somebody for money.
Got it.
So at a broader level, malware or malicious software is really what we're talking about. In some cases, there's various different reasons to do that. It could be to disrupt the operations of an organization or a foreign government or something of that nature. It could be to take down their capability. It could be just reconnaissance, right? There's a lot of published reports about nation-state actors embedding themselves in our nation's critical infrastructure, our power grid, things of that nature. Right now, they don't seem to be doing much with disrupting those networks. They're just gathering intel. They're gathering data and information for a future place and time, perhaps of their choosing. Because oftentimes, the same access that an organization or individual needs to exploit a system to just break in is the same that they would need to take it down if they really wanted to do that.
That's all right. You just got my mind on. I wanted to talk about this topic, but let's bring it up now, and that's the power grid.
Okay.
So, and there's been so many warnings recently, and sometimes I take it with a grain of salt. I'm like, is it fear mongering? Is it propaganda? But I saw a report the other day, and I want you to kind of give me some context, that if our power grid were to be taken down, that it would erase mankind in 9 months. Why?
Interesting. I've not heard that specific report. Everything we rely upon, needs some type of electrical power to run in our normal day-to-day lives. I'm not sure we'd wipe off our civilization.
So they say that
it might be a bit aggressive.
They said it would wipe off civilization because people rely on to get food, obviously work, and it wouldn't. Not that we wouldn't be able to survive, but it would have us fighting against one another, because people would see that you don't have. Basically, the bottom feeder will now go after the top of the food chain, and basically we would wipe ourselves out. So this was like an exercise that was done in one of the Ivy League schools. I think it was Johns Hopkins. Don't quote me.
Sure.
But it was what would be the reaction of a power grid attack. And it would be like we would phase out 90% of society in a very short amount of time. So I think that's really a call to action, Matt.
Absolutely.
That this needs to be taken serious. I love that we're having the platform of the podcast to be able to do this. But I want to talk about how individuals can protect themselves online. I have 2 young daughters. My son's now going to college, and he's been exposed to it more. But I worry about my daughters, and there's so much phishing and farming and all this stuff that's being done with adolescents and the youth that is so vulnerable and so easily sensationalized, right, and manipulated. So things like password management, recognizing phishing attempts, like what can we tell our audience? Because again, back to your point, the number one aspect of a strong cybersecurity plan, whether small or large, military or not, is prevention.
Right.
So how can we arm our audience so they can prevent, God forbid, these attacks personally and on a more grander scale?
I mean, individuals, you talked about our family members, like our daughters. I mean, being skeptical of individuals, because it's much easier to pretend to be someone in an online presence, right? Right now, you and I are sitting together. I'm getting nonverbal cues from you, or in this conversation. You don't get that from an asynchronous communication on something like Snapchat, right? Is it really that person on the other end? Who's this person trying to friend me on Facebook? Is it really who they say they are? Do I believe it's who they say they are just because they're connected to another individual I know? It may not be that person at all. So I think adding a degree of skepticism in our children to not always believing what is being presented to them in a digital form is certainly an area that we need to be. And I would say our employees have certainly gotten that way. Like you said, your employees have brought up these phishing emails that they've gotten. So the skepticism is there in our older generation. I think our younger generation, like kids our children's age, who we would term as digital natives, just implicitly trust what they see. And they don't realize the level of information manipulation that's happening out there at a grand scale. And they're in many cases, they're willing to completely sacrifice their privacy for fun enjoyment and not realizing the potential repercussions on their lives.
Yeah, so it's crazy because online we're compromising security and viability for that quick serotonin.
Right. That hit, that
dopamine,
3-second video clip.
Oxytocin. So listen to this. Listen to this. And this was the study that I was telling you about. The human species will not die out because of the loss of electricity. Civilizations would die out. There are estimates that 80 to 90% of the human population would die off in the first 3 years. The first 6 months would be the worst, costing 1 to 3 billion humans. No electricity, no internal combustion engine, no transportation, no communication, no refrigeration or heating. Human warehouses will empty. The human is a dangerous animal. The fighting and chaos of the living will hasten.
We're going to devolve to Lord of the Flies. That's what we're saying. And sure.
So what to do with all the dead humans and domesticated animals that will make a big stink, release disease, and lead to anarchy? Technically, electricity is one of the forms of EMF, and it's intrinsic to sentience and sentience beings, meaning for humankind. EMF is inherent in all matter. It's scary.
That is scary.
It's scary, but also empowering, right? Empowering, because we know that if cybersecurity and our mankind and the future of it, depends on it, maybe we should take it more seriously. And with that being said, let's move into the role of AI. The role of AI and machine learning in combating cyber threats. So, we often say in these walls here, Matt, that electricity in the 20th century is to what AI is in the 21st century, meaning you can't live without it, and you won't be able to live without it. And we all use some form of AI now, right?
Sure.
Uber, Hotels.com, OpenTable, Google, your phone, whatever, right? We all use some form of it. The Ring at your house, all that good stuff. So how is AI going to transform your job, your role, and the future of cybersecurity?
I think, fortunately, it's going to make people like myself even more needed, right? I mean, as systems become more like sentient beings, and we develop AI technologies to be able to perform functions today that are typically done by human beings, the ability to ensure that they're coded properly, that they don't have someone isn't building what we might call backdoor access into those type systems to try to influence the output that it's giving, right? Because that's also something now I've seen, like on various different of the public AI platforms like ChatGPT, where it's kind of giving you a warning now, letting you know, hey, this is the answer that it's giving you, but you should probably do some independent other research as well. It's a great tool today, generative AI, in that particular realm, to give you a baseline, but we have to keep somehow the human in the loop. And in military systems as well, there's still humans in the loop in warfighting. but we are absolutely interested as a nation in leveraging AI, just like every other technical domain is, into making us more efficient at what we do day to day.
Yeah, and listen, I think that we always said that there's the place in AI, and there's going to be more. Hopefully, we're just dealing with a very fundamental aspect of AI, and don't get into general intelligence where the machine actually has an IQ and goes into a humanoid, and God knows what happens. We've seen the movies, right?
Yeah, Skynet.
So, what we need to make sure is that, and I tell everybody, is using AI to make the human better.
Yes.
Not to replace the human. And I think that in healthcare, there's no place for AI that's more impactful than to increase the patient-centric aspect relationship between the doctor and the patient. And that relationship really has, the distance of that relationship has really increased recently, Matt. Doctors are spending less and less time with their patients. They're seeing them less and less. And AI continues to make the business of medicine more and more convoluted. One thing that we're working on here at Bedrock is to develop and to continue to improve our tech stack, where everything is more fluid, everything is more interfacing, integrating, so we are able to make better data-driven decisions at bedside as clinicians.
Sure.
But I will tell you, I talk to a lot of my colleagues. Not everyone is doing that. Everyone's still. What you just said about the, stationing yourself at a Starbucks and basically stripping that information and pretty much being undetected, that scares the heck out of me.
Sure.
Because at a Starbucks, maybe I get a teenager's bank account. In healthcare, you destroy a company, you destroy lives. So I think this is a very, very important topic, and I just don't think that it's getting enough attention.
Right.
And I know that it's not getting enough attention because I'll tell you right now, people don't understand it. And we always tend to think when things are difficult to understand, they don't affect me, right? I don't have to deal with it. Even AI. You said Skynet. when you think about those movies that we saw in the 80s and 90s, that's for the smart kids, right? But cyber security breaches happen to all the people. It doesn't discriminate, right? So one thing that again, how can businesses stay ahead of the curve? How can you, where is there a repository of information that I can gain a little more access? Someone like you obviously knows this, has lived this, and has a lot of experience. But what is the normal civilian able to do, again, besides changing passwords and all that? Where is there a website? Is there somewhere where we can get information about the continued potential breaches, the attacks, and what we can do to not so much be on the defensive, but be more on the offensive? Because I am a man of action. And a couple of the things you're telling me, I'm like, oh my God, I got to have a conversation with my teenagers at the house and my wife.
Sure.
But how are there sites that you can get more education on this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to understand things at a kind of a fundamental level, see how they work, there's a lot of different awareness and training courses out there. I mean, there's various different large providers you've heard of, like LinkedIn Learning, things of that nature, if you want to try to understand how things work. But from a protection standpoint, and I'll bring up kind of our daughters again. Fortunately, I do see a lot of our school curriculums integrating cybersecurity and social media security into high schools and middle schools, because it's been so important, and that we've seen a negative detrimental effect on mental health and other things of that nature because of addiction or people being called out in different ways that have affected them negatively. So that's certain realm. There's a plethora of sites out there, though, to be able to find out major breaches. From a fundamental level, I have to look into where to go, as if you want interested in trying to protect yourself. I mean, there's various different podcasts I listen to. Sure. Besides yours, right? That go out there and talk about how to protect yourself from putting things like credit freezes in place to protect you from an individual financial standpoint. To, you mentioned password protection earlier. Password management is a real thing. We are still at this tipping point where we're forcing users' passwords to become so complex they have to write them down, which we tell them not to do. right? So using things like two-factor authentication and eventually some type of biometric access point, which we all are very familiar with on various different, Apple and Android phones, is an important element as well. But then how do you protect that your fingerprint or your Face ID isn't being used somewhere else? Because that's being captured as a data field on your phone somewhere. So it can be those very things that are meant to secure us. It's always a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, listen, those very things that are meant to support us and protect us are also good farming systems, right?
Right.
Wow. Yep. Wow. So let's break it down more layman. So what are the best ways for us to protect information on social media, personal devices, and online accounts? Because I think that is the majority of our listeners.
One of the things I'd say at first is to keep your software applications and your operating systems up to date. However, you brought up one of the recent CrowdStrike things, which was meant to be a normal operating system update. It wasn't an attack per se, but it had a fatal flaw in it, which cascaded and caused a major outage of systems across the United States and the world for that matter. But keeping your systems and applications up to date, there are settings on your phone to make sure that you have the latest OS updated. You have the application, your banking application, and anything else that's you're downloading. Because many cases they're finding flaws. Not all. Some of them are operational flaws. That there was a bug in this app, or it's not interacting properly with your accounts. So updating them can be both improve the operations of it, but also the security as well.
So for the audience to know, and myself included, because I hate doing updates.
Sure.
I have an Apple phone, and I feel like, oh my God, I got an update, and I can't use my phone for 2 hours. It's just, and sometimes if I don't have the right coverage or the Wi-Fi, it takes even longer. So you are recommending that the updates on your phone be done as stated, because the updates are meant to sometimes protect, previous softwares or previous systems that were easily breached.
Yes,
for lack of a better word.
The vast majority of attacks, Andre, they exploit known flaws in systems. Very few attackers burn what we would call zero-day exploits, meaning no one's ever seen this exploit used out in the wild. Why would an attacker use such a extravagant or zero-day exploit if they could just use what they already know is published flaw? And now I'm into a system and you don't have that flaw fixed, even though there's been a patch out for months, if not years, to prevent that from happening.
That's perfect. So they basically learn. And that's the farming, that's the spear fishing, that's the whaling. So they learn a organization's kind of just culture, right, from a systems perspective, and then they're able to attack it. And if they don't have, so that is the prevention. So the updates. That's the way to basically a company stay ahead of the curve. And like you said, it's a cat and mouse game.
It is.
Who's going to win? That's awesome.
At a fundamental level, using things like malware, antivirus, like you mentioned, are an important element, and then making sure that those signatures on that antivirus application that's running on your mobile device or run on your computer are up to date. Those signatures are those fingerprints of that malicious code that if your system finds it, it will isolate it and eradicate it from your system. If you don't update those signatures, it doesn't matter if you loaded Norton a year ago. If you don't have the signatures from a week ago, you're leaving yourself vulnerable.
Wow. Wow. And that happens all the time.
Right. And there's settings in there to set them the auto update, which, being a practitioner, I like to know what I'm putting on before, but I'm very good about making sure that I manually put some of those updates in place. Because in some cases, like I mentioned, CrowdStrike, or sometimes the OSs updates what are meant to improve it sometimes have their own flaws. Like we're all treated as beta testers sometimes,
right,
on these updates.
So Android or iOS, and why?
I'm an iOS guy on the mobile device. On the desktop, I'm a Windows person. I haven't made the jump on a desktop or laptop to using a Mac OS. I'm not a Droid person. To me, it's just about the simplicity of the iOS interface. So it's just from a graphic interface and a user interface standpoint is why I choose it. There's also, I'd say, there's more attacks out there against Windows-based systems versus which Android isn't. It's kind of its own little branch off of that as well. Using things also at an individual level like Chromebooks are important because essentially they've become dumb terminals And they're really, you're not, even if you were infected with a virus on many Chromebooks today, during a particular session that you're on, once you restart that system, it's gone, because it's not running any of that data natively to your system. It's all being run in a cloud-based or web-based system.
So what would be the best device? Someone with your expertise, what would be the best device for a civilian and maybe someone who is, an executive in a company that would need a little bit more security? I know I'm a big Mac fan,
Sure.
and the reason I started using MacBook and Mac desktops is because of the proverbial inability for them to get viruses, right? Which turned out to be they get viruses, but like you mentioned, not
right.
like Windows does. So,
Right.
What is your ideal recommended device? I've been told the Surface Pro is incredible. What do you? I think that's something I want the audience to know, because we're spending a lot. I mean, especially here, we're spending a lot of money on laptops, devices that we give to physicians and stuff like that. But what do you recommend that has kind of the less incidence of breachability?
Again, there's not any perfect system. There's no system that's completely not susceptible to being attacked. I think in many cases, what I practice, it can become cumbersome, but actually having multiple devices and using them for different reasons. One of the things I've seen recommended, like from a personal standpoint, is you have a Chromebook that's dedicated only to your sensitive financial interactions with your companies, and that's all you use that for. You're not interacting with Facebook or Snapchat on that system or anything of that nature. To not allow things to potentially cross. I mean, and again, there's some other things at individual level. The reusing of passwords is one of those things that's, all of us have gotten notices of breaches for companies that we do business with, and they recommend, if you share that password across multiple systems, especially your most sensitive ones, then you're putting yourself at risk. If they broke into your Gmail account, many people probably, I'm sure a vast amount of Americans, their Gmail account is the same password as their Bank of America account. Mm-hmm. And it's not hard to guess someone's username. So again, it puts you at risk.
I'll tell you, I'm at risk, Matt, because I have Mac, right? And I have my phone, my laptop, my wife's phone, my desktop on the same iCloud. And so sometimes a text message here, I'll see it here. Sometimes a password that I have here will be automatically on my desktop.
Sure.
Ugh. So your advice is for me to segment each. It decreases the probability.
You're sacrificing
convenience
efficiency and convenience.
Efficiency.
So there's a balance there. There's definitely a balance.
It is so convenient. I love to put the phone away, because when I get home, if the kids see me on the phone, I'm in trouble, right? But if I put the phone away and I'm still texting from my laptop, I'm technically not on my phone.
Sure.
And again, these are tricks that they're learning as well, right? So my daughter knows that she can go on the laptop to go on YouTube because we can't have it on her phone. Wow, this is fascinating. One thing that we mentioned earlier, Matt, was you have a major in biology, and you were thinking about becoming an aspiring physician, but I know for sure that you made the right decision, because there is not only is the work is abundant in this space, but it is very highly compensated in these positions, and there's a lot of jobs. For example, I talked to one of our neighbor's kids. He's in his early 20s, and he got a job with Amazon, and he's making a ridiculous salary that no physician makes, by the way, right out of a school, and has all these perks and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So I think one thing to tell our audience is that this is a very well paid, and again, it's not like you're going into a business that you're gonna have 2 or 3 jobs. This is a really well paid environment with a very successful and bright looking job market. Am I wrong?
No, right? It's absolutely a growing field. There's been predictions that we have, as a workforce, we're short, hundreds of thousands, if not more, in the future of cybersecurity workforce members. What I also tell people, including, my own children and other kids of friends as well, is cybersecurity and IT touches every field. So to make yourself more marketable, like I've had a nephew of mine who's interested in perhaps law enforcement. Maybe some people would normally get a criminology degree. many cases, organizations like the FBI and state police, they're looking, there's no crime that happens today without some type of digital footprint. So having a cybersecurity degree with maybe a minor in criminology actually sets you apart to get into the law enforcement field.
Love it.
So and all these other fields, so combining it, even taking cyber as perhaps a minor or maybe a couple of your electives, I think is going to make you more marketable in a variety of fields, if you're not interested in that as a core field.
Love that. But if there is an overarching aspect where this touches everything, I think it would be an obligation, almost a failure for us not to encourage every adolescent to get into it. At least to just know more. Maybe not major or minor, but just to know a little bit more. What's next for Matt? I mean, you've done it all in 26 years or so. Again, you could have retired and gone into the sunset in Miramar, but it seems like there's more to be done for Matt. So what is next for you, and what do you see the future of cybersecurity to become?
On a personal level, Andre, next for me is I'm at a phase in my life where I want to enjoy adventures and exploration and loved ones and family members as my main focus. I love what I do in my job with my company. What I do, I deliver very high quality consultation and work for the federal government and the military. But I'm at a stage where my family comes first at this stage of my life. So. Yeah, I mean, so I'm no longer trying to necessarily climb the corporate ladder like I did in the military, and there's every year very regimented rank, making the next rank. What do I have to do next to get that next rank? I'm not really at that phase of my life. I want to enjoy myself, especially when I'm more able-bodied than I may be later in my years.
Yeah, and listen, and we talked about it earlier. In the event of a power grid elimination, life would become very short. And I think sometimes that's the thing that we really need to encourage people is that the more that you are able to acknowledge the existence of why we're here, the more you're able to enjoy it, which gets me back to, and I think I know the answer to this, but we ask it to every guest, and it's what makes Matt happy, in life. And it seems like you're a family-oriented guy. Sometimes we ask people, they tell us, something as trivial as their car, their house. Sometimes is making sure that they're able to change the life of others. So what specifically makes Matt happy on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, I like nice things like the next guy, Andre, but material things don't do it for me ultimately. To me, having loved ones to share that with and the experiences is what make me more happy. That's what fulfills me as an individual. And seeing my children grow up to become generous and kind human beings in their choosing occupation, but more importantly in their life in general is what makes me tick.
Yeah, and it's what's crazy, like and crazy, funny, ironic, however you want to mention it, but seeing our kids develop into something that makes us proud, I think, is one of the most rewarding experiences about being a parent. It's pretty cool. So with that being said, let's talk about your own upbringing. I know that you crushed us in football back in 1993, but there was a life before that. So how did you grow up? Siblings, parents? Because again, I'm sure there was a very stable environment to create somebody as accomplished as yourself.
My father was a car salesman, worked for Toyota for 36 years. My mom was a homemaker primarily. She worked part-time at a flower shop. I had a very, I would say, middle class suburb lifestyle. I lived in a great town, went to an amazing high school, had, amazing friends. I mean, I grew up on a court where you could throw a rock and you'd hit, a dozen kids within an age of up or down 2 years for me, and just being able to go out there and actually just play sports up the court or have fun or go hiking or explore in the woods, just anything. So I had a very fortunate upbringing. Definitely middle class. I mean, there wasn't much that I wanted that I wasn't able to get as a family. We took family vacations, every year, which was nice. Nothing extravagant, but certainly a very fortunate and blessed upbringing. I had an older brother, as you mentioned. My brother Tony is 5 years older. My sister Lauren 4 years older. So I have a lot of memories.
You're the baby.
I'm the middle.
But, okay.
Yeah, in the middle. But
I'm the middle
I have
too.
that middle child
We're
syndrome,
tough to
right?
deal with, baby.
Yeah.
I have that middle child syndrome too.
A little bit of that.
Break it on.
But and my brother and sister's personalities more aligned with each other. I was kind of like the odd middle child of the two. I was the only one that went the college route, actually.
Really?
And I like to say, despite several college degrees, both my brother and sister, from a material standpoint, and both are very successful business people.
That's awesome.
So have surpassed me in the money column, which is fine. But I had a very fortunate upbringing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And here's how it's. Listen, we've had a really good conversation about cybersecurity, and I'm sure cybersecurity is a topic that we can probably spend days on, right? But I think what I wanted to do for the audience is for them to actually look behind the cybersecurity realm and understand the people that are knee deep in it. So let me just kind of give you my train of thought. So you're someone who has spent his entire life. You started in the biology setting, which is the study of life, right? And then you went into working for cybersecurity. And I really think that the advent of the internet is one of the most, looking back, probably one of the most impactful inventions, discoveries, whatever we want to call it. We entered a different world. And then social media really changed everything. Social media and the internet, for me, have really transformed life in the aspect that people, unfortunately, live a different life, on social media, live a different life on the internet. We mentioned, some sites that deal with cybersecurity issues that are meant to have people explore other aspects of life that they don't want to, have public. But what I'm getting to is that as someone who has spent his entire life, right, working in a space where people pretend to be other people, where people use social media and the internet to escape life, right? As someone who has worked in that realm, right? And in the military, right? In the military, you're working to secure someone's interest, not because they're doing the right thing, but because they're doing nefarious things, right? And they're doing things that probably shouldn't be doing. So as someone who has been in that space, either to protect someone's best interest or to identify where sometimes going off the real life can get you in trouble. You now are back into the opposite. You want to enjoy real life.
I do.
You want to enjoy the fruits of real life because you've seen, the ugly side of society, which is if we don't appreciate family, if we don't appreciate our fortunes, our health, right? If we don't appreciate the God-given gifts that we have, forget money, right? There's a lot of rich people out there who don't enjoy, right? Steve Jobs being one of them. Steve Jobs, one of the most brilliant minds, one of the most progressive minds, right? The inventor of Apple computers and Mac and the iOS, one of the most wealthiest guys, right? He died very early. He died very young in his 50s, right? And didn't get to, enjoy a lot of that. So, and as we go into the internet and social media and software and AI potentially bringing a future human, right? We talk humanoid, which will, again, sometimes Skynet said that it will replace human beings or replace mankind. You're here with humility saying that, you know what, despite all that, you enjoy the simple, primitive, native things about mankind. And I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, Andre, I mean, we're connected more than we ever been as a species at a global level, yet we've lost this human connectedness day to day, the face-to-face, in-person type stuff and I think we strive to get that back, hopefully.
And that's why we started the podcast. I love sitting down with people, having a conversation. I don't care what the topic is. I'll find interest in anything. But I think what we need to do is have more human interaction. I think the pandemic affected all of that, the remote work and all that crap. I hate remote learning. Don't get me started on that. I do think that there's such value, right? And if we talk about energy, and if we talk about station, beings we talked about earlier, right? We have to be touching each other. We have to be seeing each other. We have to have conversations. I think that's the future of mankind. The future of mankind is not predicated on AI. It's predicated, can we, through social media, the internet, and a lot of these other applications that exist, could we continue human interaction at its purest form? And I think that's what's going to dictate if we continue mankind. Not if we are able to have the fanciest phone, the fanciest computer, or the fanciest cybersecurity system. Is can you communicate with another person in the most primitive way?
Well, I think it's admirable to me, Andre, the way that you describe you want to leverage AI and machine learning to deliver a patient-centric experience.
100%.
You don't want to remove the human-to-human interaction. You want to enable it to be better. And I saw this happen. I mean, again, having been a military member, I experienced government-provided healthcare for 20 years. And I saw the digital transformation when things started to go from paper to digital. And I remember very poignantly sitting in a doctor's office with a physician, and it was my annual military checkup. And he's sitting at a computer, not facing me, asking me questions.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
And you might as well, what's the point? Why am I even here?
And again, there's been a complete separation of what the most powerful thing of a physician. The most powerful thing that we have as clinicians is the power of the human touch.
Yes.
And the power of the healing touch. And the power of me being able to listen to you, not to respond, but to understand. And you're right, a device is eliminating that from us. So we have a passion here to leverage AI, not to alienate the clinician, but to bring the clinician closer. And I think that is it. I look at Facebook, a lot of my friends that I grew up with, I still know, what they're doing in life. I still know their families. I feel like I'm with them because I see them on social media. So we have a precedent that we have where with technology, when used correctly, brings mankind together. But we also have a precedent when used incorrectly, I should say, brings us further apart. But I'll tell you what the to me the great differentiating factor about Bedrock is that the reason that we bring it apart is to maximize profitability. It's all about money, right? But here I tell you one thing, and I make this a proclamation. If we use technology to bring the patient closer to the provider, the money will chase us.
Sure.
We won't have to chase money because ultimately the clinical aptitude and the superiority of our clinical outcomes will allow such a value proposition that will allow healthcare to become so much better, patients to become so much better, and we as a society will be so much better. So to me, AI is an invitation to make mankind better, stronger, and I know other people tend to be, AI is going to be the replacement of us. No, this is going to be the new wave of society, and I can't wait to be part of it. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Andre.
Again, enjoy the conversation. You are, we can do this again.
Absolutely.
Because I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
And we are changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Andre.
Awesome. That was good.